Well, thank you all for coming. I'm Carl Gershman from the NED. It's a great pleasure to have you all with us, and it's also a great pleasure for me to welcome Lobsang Sangay, the Sikyong of the Central Tibetan Administration, to the National Endowment for Democracy. We greatly look forward to discussing with us the challenges and the opportunities faced by the Tibetan government in exile, which he has led since he officially took the oath of office on August the 8th, 2011. Brian Joseph, who is sitting with him over here, the NED Senior Director for Asia and Global Programs, will moderate the discussion after Lobsang Sangay comes up here to deliver his initial remarks. NED has had a very long and close relationship with the Tibetan movement, dating back to 1989 when we made a grant to the International Fund for the Development of Tibet, which was devoted, among other things, to promoting a Tibetan-Chinese dialogue on issues affecting Tibet's future. Since then, we have made 180 Tibet grants totaling more than $5 million. We have also had a very close political relationship with the Tibetan movement. We've been honored to have His Holiness the Dalai Lama speak at many of our meetings, and in 2010 we presented him with the NED's Democracy Service Medal at a wonderful ceremony that I'm sure a lot of people here were at the Library of Congress. It's an honor that he richly deserved, since His Holiness deeply believes in democracy and has been one of the world's most fervent and articulate and persuasive proponents of the democratic idea for more than half a century. Even as a very young man, before he fled from Tibet in 1959, His Holiness sought to implement significant democratic reforms in the Tibetan system of government, partly as a way to mobilize the Tibetan people against the Chinese attempt to uproot their traditional society through forced collectivization. And also because he believed, as he said at a lecture that we sponsored here in Washington in 1998, that the old system was outdated and ill-equipped, he said, to face the challenges of the contemporary world. The process of building a democratic government in exile began almost as soon as he arrived in India. The first elections among Tibetan refugees were held in the summer of 1960, just months after he established his official residence in Dharamsala. And a democratic constitution was promulgated in 1963 on the 4th anniversary of the Lhasa uprising. A charter adopted by the elected National Assembly in 1991 transferred from the Dalai Lama to that body the power to elect a cabinet, including a prime minister vested with day-to-day powers. The election of Lobsang Sangay on April 27th, 2011, completed this historic process of devolving political authority from the Dalai Lama to an elected chief minister. We'll hear more in a moment from Lobsang Sangay about what this process means for the Tibetan community in exile and for the future of Tibet. What I think is also important is what it means for the future of China. The leaders in Beijing like to present the Chinese political system as a modern, efficient alternative to dysfunctional and crisis-ridden liberal democracy. China, closely, many of whom we've published in our Journal of Democracy, see something very different. An authoritarian regime whose resilience is reaching its limits as the forces favoring change grow stronger than the forces resisting it. An elite that fearfully tries to hold on to a backward political system as an increasingly rights-conscious population insists on normal standards of political and economic accountability, and fair treatment for all. A regime that resorts to nationalism because it lacks political legitimacy, even as a new citizens movement affirms the fundamental rights of citizenship at the risk of imprisonment or worse. As China approaches the 25th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square crackdown, Sikyong, a leader of the new citizens movement, now sits in prison, as does China's Nobel Peace Laureate Liu Xiaobo. The new Tibetan democracy is a natural partner of Chinese dissidents like Sikyong and Liu Xiaobo, and the growing citizenship movement in China. There is great potential for a rich exchange on how China can build a truly modern and law-based political system that guarantees basic rights and freedoms for all Chinese citizens, including religious freedom and the cultural, linguistic, and religious rights of minorities. I know that promoting such an exchange is a high priority for Lobsang Sangay. He has already organized 7 major conferences on contemporary Tibet among Chinese, Tibetan, Indian, and Western scholars, in addition to 2 unprecedented meetings between the Dalai Lama and more than 100 Chinese scholars. His track to diplomacy is in addition, of course, to his normal responsibilities of building the capacity of the Central Tibetan administration and the human resources of the Tibetan community in exile, and of course also to reach out politically to leaders and people who shape opinion around the world. Lobsang Sangay came to his position as the Sikyong of the CTA with impressive qualifications, having earned a degree in juridical science from Harvard Law School, where when he received the Young K. Kim Prize of Excellence for his dissertation entitled Democracy in Distress, Is Exile Polity a Remedy? A case study of Tibet's government in exile. He received that prize in 2005. And I know that we're all interested in learning how his views on this subject have evolved after almost 3 years on the job. Finally, let me note that it would have been a lot for anyone to take over the responsibilities of this job, especially since he wasn't just taking them over from anybody, but from the Dalai Lama. He had very large sandals to fill. I'm happy to introduce Lobsang Sangay.
Floor is yours.
That's it.
That's it.
I thought we'd start with a question or something. Hello. Hello. Okay. So you can hear me. First, profound apology for being late, because being a Tibetan, we are not used to wearing watch, and we were just looking at the sun. Today being a very cloudy day, we just could not figure out whether. Actually, also partly blame the DC traffic. We left at 5:45, but it took us so long. I want to thank Carl Gershman for a kind introduction, and also it so happened that it happens to be the 25th anniversary of relationship between NED and CTA, because it started in 1989, so this year being 2014, so right, 25 years, that's true. And also, Carl said $5 million and 180 projects funded so far. Would like to appreciate that as well. And I'm glad to be here. So Brian is going to ask all the tough questions. That's why he's acting very serious and saying, floor is yours. So it's essentially indicating that the tough questions are going to come soon. First, let me start with, I was told to speak for 10, 15 minutes. Start with the paradox between exile and democracy. Because when you're in exile, essentially as an exile movement, normally what you emphasize, or what are the essential foundational factors that you have to have is single leadership, single voice, and unity. So these are the, perhaps one could make a case that these are the paramount or foundational factors one ought to have, because you're in exile. Your goal is very simple. You have to return to your homeland. Hence, single leadership important, single voice important, and unity. But then when you say democracy, there is underlying paradox, if not contradiction, because instead of single voice, you have to have freedom of speech. Instead of single leader, you have to have opposition parties. Instead of unity, there has to be diversity. In that sense, perhaps that's the reason why, if you study government exiles or exile movement or organizations, you don't find them to be democratic in the classic sense, where you have election, where you have parliament and judiciary, because normally you are in exile for a single purpose, to return home. Exile means you are exiled, now you have to return home. Hence, your goals are set. So given the underlying tension or paradox in exile and democracy, so Tibetan case is very unique. In that sense, this is a test. If it works well, it could be a model for other refugee communities or marginalized groups around the world. For other reasons, there are other reasons why they can replicate the Tibetan model, and then one being this being democratic. Now, as far as Tibetan democracy is concerned, it's with the vision of His Holiness Dalai Lama that we have a democratic setup, because the story he shares is he went to China in 1954, I think, and he saw the National People's Congress meeting. And then he attended quite a few meetings as well. And the National People's Congress is actually going to start very soon, as we speak, in China, in Beijing soon. So he attended, and he noticed that people around him were dozing off while the meeting was going on. As soon as the vote takes place, everybody raised their hands, As soon as it's time to clap, everybody started clapping. So he sees the unanimity in clapping and raising their hands and endorsing resolutions, but hardly anyone listened to the speech or the resolution when they were actually discussed. Then he comes to India. He noticed that the real dynamic nature of Indian democracy is raucous, robust, loud. And then he said he got shocked when the Indian opposition leader essentially got up and criticized Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Then. So he said, okay, I like this model. He wanted Tibetans to be robust, raucous, and loud as the Indian democracy. And then when he had to flee Tibet in 1959, as soon as he arrived in India, he said, we have to have democracy. First, he said, we have to have modern governing system. And now you can imagine then he mandated, essentially asked people to vote and elect their own members of the parliament. Now you have to imagine, now we lost our country in March of 1959, and 80,000 Tibetans fled to India. And Tibetans were just refugees. And essentially they were sent around the border areas of Sikkim and Dalhousie and Manali as road builders. And they were all working. Then the what you call decree or the decision comes that Tibetans have to participate in election, first ever election in exile. Now on the roadside, people started gathering and said, okay, His Holiness Dalai Lama says we have to have election. Now who do we elect, rather select? And they looked around, and then most of the people who participated in that process was mainly male and adults. Obviously, female, women, and children were not included in the discourse. And then the first selection happened in 1960, and the first parliament was convened on September 2nd of 1960. And September 2nd is celebrated or observed every year as Tibetan Democracy Day, even today. And then he had another idea. He said, not just we have to have an elected parliament, we have to have a constitution, democratic constitution. And then to make it truly democratic, he wanted a provision to impeach the Dalai Lama. And then the first constitution we had was in 1963, in which a provision was mandated where Tibetan parliament and others could impeach the Dalai Lama himself. Now that became a big quote-unquote scandal of sorts. Tibetans were like shocked. We lost our country. We are refugees here. But then now how can even fathom impeaching the Dalai Lama, far less having a provision in the law? But he said, no, if we want to have democracy, even the Dalai Lama should be subservient to the constitution, and even he should be impeached if necessary. And after a lot of discourse, essentially the person who translated the Indian constitution into Tibetan language was blamed partly for bringing this evil communist red idea into the Tibetan community. But His Holiness said nothing doing, we have to have the impeachment clause, and it was kept. Now, in 1963, he also thought we should be more modern and we should elect our representation from the women section as well. Women, And then first, women representatives were elected in 1963 as well. So we were far ahead of Switzerland because they had only a women representation in 1970s, So hence in mid-70s, we had the representation from indigenous religion, Pön, as well. As you know, Tibetan parliament is set up in the form of provinces, Uitsang, Kham, and Amdo, 3 traditional provinces of Tibet, with now 10 representation each, and 4 Buddhist sects, Nyingma, Kagyu, Sakya, and Geluk, and Pön. So 2 each, 10. So we have now 2 representatives from North America and 2 from Europe. So altogether 44 representatives. And then 2000, in early 90s actually, the parliament elected the cabinet. Till then, His Holiness Dalai Lama directly appointed the cabinet. So it changed in 1990s. And in 2001, he declared himself semi-retired. And the Kalun Tripa, my predecessor, was directly elected by the Tibetans. And then in 2011, so there was a direct election of my position, and His Holiness Dalai Lama decided to devolve all his political authority. And as Carl said, and I was given the job to fill in the shoes of the Dalai Lama, the Nobel laureate, global statesman, advocate of compassion and peace around the world. And when I looked at it, the shoe was so big, I could never fill in. Now that's in brief, that's the history of Tibetan democracy. Now, as far as my involvement is concerned, briefly about myself, I was born and brought up in a small refugee camp, Tibetan refugee camp. If you want to take a car taxi ride, when I was a child, you had to wait anywhere from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. We used to have 4 or 5 taxis going to the town, Darjeeling. If you miss those, you have to come back home and wait the next day. So with an acre of land, a couple of cows, that's all we had. And with 5 or 6 Tibetan families. And went to refugee school and ate lentil soup and rice, dal and bhat every day for dinner for 10 years. And then, I used to spend my winter vacation going to forests, fetching wood for our home and cutting grass for cows. That's how I grew up. And I often joke and say, the dumpling that we get at school is dark and hard. If you throw it, it bounces higher. It proves Newton's third law wrong, So with that kind of upbringing, I went to Tibetan Refugee School in Darjeeling. From there to Delhi University. And thanks to the Fulbright scholarship, I managed to get Fulbright scholarship to go to Harvard Law School to do my master's degree, then pursued my doctorate, SJD, and then I was appointed fellow. And I was there till I finished my doctorate in 2004, and I was employed till 2011. Now, in 2011, when I ran for the election, obviously, I'll share some stories. I was, from conventional point of view, I was the last person to have won the election. I think, including my friends, dismissed me as someone who could win. Even I thought, I didn't think I would win, because the conventional wisdom was there's no chance that I could win, because other candidates, very serious candidates, former Kalun Tripa Speaker, Deputy Speaker of the Parliament, so on and so forth. As for me, I had spent 16 years in America, in the People's Republic of Cambridge, drinking Starbucks coffee and away from the Tibetan community. So I was out of touch. But nonetheless, Tibetans, I travel around to many of the Tibetan settlements. For some reason, actually, people turn out in large number to see what I had to say because I was a new guy in town. And then preliminary round happened. I got the largest share of the vote. And in final round, the likelihood that I would win was very high. But then on March 10th of 2011, that's our National Uprising Day. That's when His Holiness Dalai Lama makes the equivalent of State of the Union address. And there he made the biggest decision in the Tibetan history. He said, I hereby will fully retire and devolve all my political authority to whoever is elected next. The problem was the final round of election was on March 20th, 10 days later. Now, normally in conventional election, you can give family reasons to withdraw. Oh, my wife says something, and I have a young child, hence I withdraw. But in the Tibetan context, you can't, because it's it's partly a movement. To withdraw from the movement is like, if not betraying the cause, at least you're not fulfilling your sacred duty. So you can't give conventional family reasons to withdraw. But I had only 10 days time to think whether I should try to fill in the shoes of His Holiness Dalai Lama or not. But then, because the job description is you have to take on or you have to face the quote unquote the next superpower in the world, China, and you have to convince them to solve the issue of Tibet peacefully, and then and then you have to also create awareness to the extent that international community will support you to press the Chinese government to solve the issue of Tibet. So challenges continues to be enormous, but then instead of reaching paralysis through analysis, whether I should do it or not, in the end I resorted to traditional thinking. That's typical Tibetan. You say, "Dingye lere," it's my karma, it's my destiny. So a Tibetan got to do it. So it happens to be me, so I said I'll do it. Now, whatever will be the consequences will be determined by my individual karma and the collective karma of all Tibetans. So with that, I took the responsibility, and it's been now 2.5 years almost that I've been in this position. I don't know what my individual and collective karma will determine in the end, but the least I could do is work hard. That I've tried. Now I'm happy to report that in the last 2.5 years, I've traveled to 95% of all the Tibetan settlements in India. Except for Sikkim, I've traveled to almost all the monasteries and almost all the schools in India, and almost 80% of even elderly homes. And also, except for Holland and Spain, I have traveled to almost all the countries in Europe where Tibetans live in large community. And except for New Mexico, Vermont, and Montreal, I've traveled to almost all the major towns in North America, Canada and US, where Tibetans live. So that I've done because people have voted me and given me the responsibility. The least I could do is show up and show them my face. I often jokingly say, my second name is Lobsang Sangay, means lion. So I often say I don't look like a lion, but this is who I am. So I'm here to report that I'm trying the best I can to fulfill the aspirations of Tibetans in Tibet and do the best I can. So far, the response has been very positive. I'm happy to report that wherever I travel around the world, from Australia, Japan, to any of the European countries or America, Tibetans turn out in large number, wear their traditional dress, whether at the airport, at the hotel, or in an auditorium. And then, they are, I think, supporting and rallying around the symbol that I represent than me as an individual, because I know for sure that I'm just an ordinary guy. 3 years ago, when I finished my term, I will I'll go as an ordinary person, as ordinary Tibetan. But then the Tibetans have rallied around the symbol because on uh, August 8th of 2011, when I took over the day of my inauguration, His Holiness Dalai Lama kindly graced the occasion, and he said, "Ring ni nying du nak ve debe tuns." In Tibetan means, "This is my long cherished goal has been achieved today." With that, I want to end. By that, what I mean to say was His Holiness had this vision to have a democratic system in exile for a long time. So 50 plus years, he worked at it diligently. He led, he casualed, he pressed Tibetans to move towards democracy. And on August 2011, he said, this is my long cherished goal. Meaning, he wanted Tibetan people to take responsibilities, stand on their own feet, so that the democratic system will carry forward the movement moving forward and not depend on him as an individual. And then a few days later, he gave an interview to a couple of news media, and he said, on the night of August 8th, he slept very well, 8 or 9 hours. Since then, he says that he sleeps very well. It's just that my sleep pattern has been disrupted. So with that note, I want to end, and it's a great honor and privilege to be here at NED. And then I'm just rushing through and giving you at least the essence of Tibetan democracy so that we have more time for Q&A. Because I'm rushing through because I know I was unusually late for the occasion. So with that note, I'm happy to face probing and tough questions from Brian, Joseph, and all of you. So thank you very much for coming here. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me start with the first question, then we'll turn it open to the audience who have questions. I'm struck you started off by suggesting in the very beginning that there's a natural tension between an exile movement or an exile government and an exile democratic government. So you need to speak with one voice, you need to have one policy position, it needs to be coordinated, whereas a democracy, even the Tibetan democracy, it introduces multiple voices, it introduces competing agendas, it forces to the forefront critical issues, whether it's autonomy or independence or whatever the issues you're grappling with. So I'm just curious, from your experience so far, how have you been able to manage that tension of needing to represent sort of the government, the citizens and the Tibetans in exile and their democratic aspirations, while also honoring the need to to fight for Tibetans' return to Tibet? So how have you balanced that tension?
No, I think what you do is you respect the differences of views. Because once you embrace democracy, you have to respect freedom of speech. So obviously, when I do my job, there are several or plenty of people who criticize you for all the things that you are not doing well, and then you respect that because I often say this. We have to put Tibet and Tibetan people front and center. And even those people who are criticizing, who are writing things, their motivation, their intention should be good. And I take that, should be good because they all are so concerned, hence they're criticizing you, so that you can do a better job to fulfill the aspirations of Tibetans inside Tibet. So with that mindset, you do your work. Now, as far as situation inside Tibet is concerned, since I took over, it has been a very sad and painful phase in Tibet's history because the number of self-immolations have now reached 126, and of which more than 100 have died. Now, why I said painful is, except for one self-immolation in 2009, rest of the 125 happened, so to speak, under my watch, because the first one was on March 16th of 2011. And as I said, the final round of the election was March 20th. Since then, all happened during my election and after I've been elected. So in that sense, it's very painful because Tibetans have resorted to self-immolation as a form of protest. it reflects both the desperation and the determination on their part. And obviously, as far as our administration is concerned, we discourage drastic actions by Tibet inside Tibet. We discourage self-immolation. As a human being, no one should die the way in the form of self-immolation. But as Buddhists, we pray for anyone who dies. And as a Tibetan, we support their aspirations, because their aspirations are the aspirations of all the Tibetans. It's a universal aspiration. They want to see the return of His Holiness Dalai Lama to Tibet and freedom for Tibetan people. These aspirations are common aspirations of all the Tibetans. So these are their voices, and also largely Tibetan inside Tibet have participated in the Tibetan democracy indirectly, indirectly, because I receive letters and messages from inside Tibet. Many of the monasteries, they pray for long life of His Holiness Dalai Lama and the success of CTA and my success. And they put pictures in the monastery when they pray. I've seen that. And people have also sent tankas, with His Holiness and Sakyong Rinpoche and Panchen Lama's photos, and my also photo on the feet, near their feet. It just it just kind of surprises you also to see your picture on tankas, because on tankas you normally have only deities and the lamas. You can't have, at least to me, to have layperson's photo on tankas is difficult to digest, at least for me. Now, when you receive this kind of tankas, what do? Out of respect, you put it up somewhere in your office, which my attendant did. But it's quite difficult, and I shared with His Holiness, and His Holiness said, well, we have tankas with the picture of Chinese emperor, who is also a layperson, or a Mongol king, Gushri Khan and others, layperson. And then they compose songs, obviously, long life His Holiness Dalai Lama, Panchen Lama, that you see plenty of songs. Recently a song mentioning my name also. And it kind of saddens you, and then also to see some of the singers arrested. And they're behind bars because they mention your name in songs, and then to put it on YouTube. So these are the voices that is coming from inside Tibet. So you try to balance all that. And then respect their voices and trying to fulfill their aspirations. So I didn't answer your question, but I was just trying to bring in all the voices together, yes.
Okay, well, let me turn it open to the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand. We've got a microphone. Introduce yourself, your name and your affiliation if you have one, and please keep your question relatively brief so we can get a number of questions in. Why don't we go in the middle here? Right there.
Thank you. My name is Nima Binara. I'm with the U.S. Department of Justice National Security Division, but speaking in my private capacity. And Sikyong, it's great to see you again. I was hoping that you could clear up some confusion that some of us have had about your definition of autonomy for Tibet, so what the CTA is asking for. And what I'd like to know specifically is first, what your definition of genuine autonomy encompasses, and second, whether there's any difference between that of His Holiness. We're all familiar with His Holiness's Strasbourg proposal and the 5-point peace plan, which basically calls for Tibetan autonomy as democracy and demilitarization. There's the 2008 memorandum and the note don't really change that substantively, or at least they're consistent with that vision. The confusion comes from your October 2013 talk at the Council on Foreign Relations, which some people reacted quite strongly to. You said that you are, quote, not asking that democracy be implemented or be allowed in Tibet, unquote. You accepted communist rule in Tibet in its present structure and suggested that autonomy would be achieved as long as Tibetans are in charge in the leadership within this system. Now, those are from the transcript that CFR put out, so it could be that they misquoted you. But a lot of people, like Tsering Wese, the Tibetan writer, reacted very strongly. Wesela said, she felt like she had been punched in the gut, was her reaction. Obviously, we all care very deeply about the future of of Tibet, not just in exile, but of Tibet. So I was hoping that you could take this opportunity here at the National Endowment for Democracy and speak to what your vision of future autonomy would encompass for Tibet. Thanks very much.
My vision, so to speak, of Tibetan autonomy or genuine autonomy is exactly the same as was written in the Memorandum of Genuine Autonomy. And we always say, and it's true, we seek genuine autonomy within the framework of the Chinese Constitution. So nothing outside that, within the framework of the Chinese Constitution. And then, now does Chinese Constitution allows democracy or not is the question. Because I was asked on that day, the question is, so you expect democracy with freedom of speech and right to vote. I'm paraphrasing here, but that was the question. And I said, because we see genuine autonomy within the framework of the Chinese Constitution. Now, that doesn't allow democracy in what we say, freedom of speech and right to vote. So if you read the memorandum, and I think if I'm not wrong, the chapter 3, where it clearly says the socialism as an ideology and the structure of the present government system remain the same. Within that framework, we are seeking genuine autonomy. So hence, even though I said in that same question, I said, we practice democracy, we aspire democracy, but within the framework of the Chinese Constitution and genuine autonomy that we seek, the democracy that we understand is not part of the demand in the Memorandum of Genuine Autonomy. So my view is very much reflected in the memorandum submitted by the Tibetan administration in 2008.
Thank you. There was another question up front here, I think. Yeah. Right in the very front, Amanda.
Hi, Kaylin from Voice of America, Burmese service. And I'm Burmese, and Burma is on this merge of change and this transition to democracy. Yet there are so many violences, there are so many human rights violations in the country, from the sectarian violence between Muslims and Buddhists to other violences in Kachin State. But I just wanted to focus on this quote-unquote communal violence between Muslims and Buddhists. What is Tibet doing does Tibet have a comment on what's going on in Burma, especially because Tibet is such, it encourages Buddhism and it's a Buddhist nation. So how do you feel about people like monks like Wiratu promoting violence in Burma? And then I also wanted to ask, if Tibet were to be on this merge of democracy, do you think that communal violence can happen or occur in Tibet as well?
I hope not. Now, as far as the specifically the Rohingyas, violence against Rohingyas, Muslims in Burma, I think the Holiness has also issued a statement on that. And then we have also stated is that we subscribe to nonviolence and we practice nonviolence, and we urge anyone not to listen to us, but at least we share that we practice nonviolence, and to resort to violence doesn't serve anyone's interest.
Can you fix your microphone a little bit?
So violence against Rohingya Muslims is really unfortunate. I think it should not happen, especially by Buddhists, and to have the cover of the Time magazine, they're quoting some Buddhist monks encouraging violence is really unfortunate. It should not happen.
Good. Kumar?
not
Yeah,
clear.
Kumar from Amnesty
You gotta put the
International.
microphone a little closer.
I have two quick questions. First is your comment about self-immolation, that you oppose and you discourage people from doing that. That's a non-violent action. You can discourage people from encouraging people to self-immolate, but if someone on their own decides out of desperation, someone to go to that far means out of desperation, you're opposing a non-violent action, actually. So my question is, why do you do that? Number two, tomorrow a group of people go on hunger strike. You should oppose them. Because that's also non-violent action, that also end up death. Another danger you are facing here is, if you suppress non-violent actions, then armed struggle is a possibility. You'll be indirectly. These people who are self-immolating, if there is no acceptance and protest from people like you, then they may resort to armed struggle, which I'm sure you are not for it. My second question is unrelated to this, is the plight of former Panjal Lama. He has disappeared almost 17, 18 years ago. Any concrete actions you have taken, you mean your administration have taken? Because you are setting up another Dalai Lama after Dalai Lama's time, another new Dalai Lama popping up in China, if you are quiet on this case. Thank you very much.
The hunger strike, actually, Tibetans do resort to hunger strikes, so we don't, except a few cases where in Delhi, when some Tibetan organizations have resorted to hunger strike, and then when they reach 33rd, 34th, 5th day, few times His Holiness have asked them to end hunger strike because it harms their health. Now, as far as self-immolation is concerned, yes, we discourage drastic actions by Tibet inside Tibet, or even protests, mainly because the consequences. If Tibetans resort to protest inside Tibet, they get arrested, they get tortured, and sometimes they disappear, and many die as well. So given the fact that the consequences, it's easy for us from outside to encourage that, right? Hence, as far as self-immolation is concerned, we discourage because it's harming them. Now, having said that, we support the aspirations, though, because the aspirations are universal aspiration. As a human being, you don't want to see the protest in the form of self-immolation. Even though it's non-violence in the sense you're not harming any Chinese person or Chinese property. But then you're harming yourself. But life is precious. We want to see every Tibetan live and see the day freedom is restored in Tibet. We want to see, that's why, as far as self-immolation is concerned, as a human being, we discourage, and as a Buddhist, we pray. And as a Tibetan, we support their aspirations. We magnify why they're suffering, why they're doing it. Now, as far as Panjal Lama is concerned, we really don't know much about his whereabouts, even whether he's alive or not. This year is, sadly, the 25th anniversary, or his 25th birthday on April 25th. So we will hold a major event and a prayer in Dharamsala, and also ask Tibetans around the world to remember Gendin Chökyi Nyima. And unfortunately, he has disappeared. And from what we know is that his parents and his grandparents were also made to leave the village, and the grandparents suffered quite a bit, actually, and one of them had passed away. Other than that, we really don't know much about Gendin Chökyi Nyima, unfortunately.
Let's take this question in the front, and then we'll go to the back.
My name is Diane Cash, and I have the distinct honor to travel to Dar es Salaam on April the 2nd, and I'm delivering a workshop to the Tibetan Chamber of Commerce, 75 to 100 entrepreneurs, Tibetan entrepreneurs, and we're looking at how to bring their products to other routes to market so as to thrive and grow. And my question is around how is it that we in the United States, who have democracy and freedom of speech, like, what more could we be doing? And are there any programs that you're aware of here or in the region that we could do, we could work on to create that community to help them continue to grow and be profitable and successful? And also in support of that, how do we, leveraging democracy, create a voice for everyone to share globally what Tibetans around the world are doing? Is there a vehicle for that kind of communication, given China's watchful eye?
Oh, so you are going to Dharamsala on April 2nd?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So we'll be happy to receive you there.
Thank you.
And Tibetan Chamber of Commerce as well.
Correct. That's where I'm presenting.
Okay.
The workshop, yes.
And then, yeah, perhaps you should also contact our finance department because we have one Tibetan entrepreneurship program. And because once you come to Dharamsala, I'll be happy to share more in detail, and when you meet my colleagues, they'll be happy to show you other entities as well. For example, there's sweater selling association, actually, sweater sellers association. Tibetans are known to be quite trustworthy and quite hardworking business people, actually. One story is that Tibetans go to a place called Ludhiana in Punjab, it's near Dharamsala. This is how Tibetans do their business. So they go to Ludhiana every year around July, August, and they meet with Lalas, that's the businessmen, mainly Sardajis, Punjabis. And then, they approach and ask for loan of sweaters worth 100,000 to 1 million rupees, but no collateral. And the Lalas or the Indian businessmen say, what's your name? Tenzing or Dorje, where you do business, Jaipur or Patna. That's all they note down. And they give, 100,000 to 1 million rupees worth of sweaters. And Tibetans go sell the sweaters. And after 5 months, they visit these areas where they sell sweaters, and Tibetans rush to pay back the money. So this has been going on for around 50 years. So that level of trust is there. So you'll meet those kinds. And also small scale business, Tibetans who do small business, selling Tibetan artifacts, things like that. So you can really help them quite a bit by connecting to the international market or the American market. And maybe you can help them improve the quality of product and how to export. So there are a lot of things you can do. So if you're interested, we'll be happy to host you.
Okay. Let's take two more questions. So we have, or let me see how a show of hands how many people have questions, because I want to make sure we have time for the reception after. Let's take these three questions then here. Start in the back, this gentleman, and then we'll go forward.
My name is Karma Doji from Radio Free Asia. It was really honored to listen to Sikyong for this wonderful talk. I also had an opportunity to listen to his talk at the October, the Canadian Parliament. It was really honor. I just have two thoughts in this presence. One is if you look at the Radio Free Asia, the website today, we had a story which is related to our Sikyong. One monk who is about 34 years old had been arrested by the Chinese authorities in Chamdo, and he was bitten so badly that he was in fact pronounced dead on the way to hospital. So one of the reasons why he was detained is because he was in possession of one of the DVD in which our Sikyong stock was included in that. So I'm just wondering what kind of message you have for these kind of Tibetans who are doing so much, taking your words and taking your guidance.
Yeah, actually, whenever you hear this kind of story, as a human being, as a Tibetan, uh, some way saddens you, thinking that they give their life for their body, for the cause, and mentioning your name. And obviously, you pray for them. Because as I mentioned, 126 self-immolations have taken place. And almost all of them, if I'm in India, the names pass through my office because it has to. I'll be one of the very first to hear what happened. Then often you hear someone has committed self-immolation. It won't be clear whether it's a male or female or monk or not. We try to find more, and after some time you know that their age, some of them are teenagers, some of them are mother of kids and father of kids, monks. And as a human being, as a Tibetan, obviously, you go through a lot of emotions, you know. And then obviously, first thing you say is, as a Tibetan, you pray. You pray that they be reborn, in better position. And then as also as a Tibetan, you get this resolve, I have to work harder, and I have to do more than what I'm doing, so that their lives, that they have sacrificed, do not go in vain, and that their voices that they've raised is not forgotten, Hence, I do the best I can to travel around, to magnify their voices, highlight their sufferings, and appeal to the international community around what they're seeking. So yes, you pray for them, and then you say, I'll work harder and do the best I can.
Okay. Let's take these next two questions together. There's one here and then right after that, Palki.
Hi, my name is Sarah Mentrop, and I'm from the Center for Strategic Study, or for Strategic and International Studies. And my question is, are you concerned with perhaps being too successful of an example of a democracy in exile, and that it may decrease concern from the international stage where they may have to deal with more pressing issues, and that your issue isn't as urgent because you're doing better than all the other refugee communities? And given that a lot of other people have alluded to the self-immolations, and that's what gets media coverage, are you concerned that democracy could that be a hindrance to your plight? Thank you.
No, I don't think so, because I wrote my dissertation on democracy. So I'm a student of democracy, and I do believe the universality of freedom and universality of democracy. That I do believe. And of course, for other refugee communities and marginalized groups, it might be a good idea to study the Tibetan model and adopt it if possible. Because recently someone was telling me, is it in Kenya? There are some Somali refugees, something like 500,000 of them in one camp. They've been there for 20 plus years, And every morning I was told that hundreds of cars leave the storeroom to distribute rice and, just like that. Now, as far as Tibetans are concerned, we are around 150,000 exile, of which 90,000 in India. We organize ourselves pretty well. All the settlements are run by the mayor-like person who's appointed by Tibetan administration, and we have local assembly who does check and balance, and then we have Tibetan media and all the local NGOs as well. For example, Carl mentioned, that NED has given $5 million and 180 projects or so. That's how we have survived, actually, as far as Tibetan administration and Tibetan community is concerned. Whatever we get from the foreign aid from outside, only 4% is kept for administrative cost, and 96% goes directly to the project. So even though there's a lot of restrictions and hesitation on the part of governments to support us, Not many governments give us grants, actually. Even the major foundations, if they have branch office in Beijing, they will not touch us with 10 feet pole. Nonetheless, but most of the contributors to our community are individuals and small NGOs. They do it because of a performance. And I've been there only for 2+ years, but all the elders that they have contributed, they have worked so hard. So it's mainly because of the democracy setup that we have, the transparency that we have. Now, from 11th of March on till 21st, for 10 days, our Tibetan parliament will be in session. And then obviously being an executive, you're looking forward to, I don't know, forward or not, to a lot of questions from the parliamentarians. They ask you all kinds of questions. So the way we function, in that sense, it is relatively successful. But also I think this is a good model for other refugee communities to emulate, because you move away from this dependent syndrome, in the sense we are self-reliant, we organize ourselves, we make our schools run, hospitals run, settlements run, and in transparent fashion, and 90+% of the funding goes direct to the project. So that way, other refugee and marginalized groups should study our model. Now, if success, leads, that's your question, if because we are successful, then others might not be interested, then you're almost saying, don't be successful, don't function in democratic fashion. That I think we should not compromise. As I said, as per His Holiness' vision, he wanted to do this, even though there's inherent contradiction and paradox in democracy in exile. But this lab test, we want it to work, so that we can at least, at least make ourselves a successful community and share it with other communities as well. So we have some Chinese dissidents coming to Dharamsala. My friend Yang Jali is here, and others who have come. Uyghurs have come, and other Burmese have also come. They all come to Dharamsala and realize that hey, it is a successful entity. It's a democratic entity that they wish they also had. So that way, we are quite proud of our achievement.
Thank you. My name is Rebecca Posey. I'm a business and human rights consultant. I'm visiting from Atlanta today. My question actually builds on the last question. I'm interested to know, how have you engaged through your office with Western governments, both the U.S. and other Western governments? What have you asked them for? What have you said to them, and what has been their response?
Well, now there's executive branch, and then there's parliament or the Congress. With Congress, yes, I can go and, for example, the U.S., I met with the Speaker, John Boehner, and Nancy Pelosi, Reid. So most of the leadership, Senator, before Secretary of State John Kerry, before he was the Secretary of State, he was Chairman of Senate Foreign Relations. So in the Congress, I get to meet them, and then we can have a press release and photos taken together, things like that. They have long engagements, no problem. In the executive, anywhere I go, they want a bit of a deniability. But then, as I always say, wherever we go, we always say we meet with those who want to meet, and don't complain about those who don't want to meet. Because given a choice, we know they want to meet. But then His Holiness is received in the executive branch. Recently, he had a very successful meeting with President Barack Obama, and also U.S. government appointed the special coordinator on Tibetan issue, Sarah Suwo. She's from Harvard Kennedy School. And then also wherever I've traveled, so I do meet actually people from the executive as well as the parliament or the Congress. It's the executive part we don't disclose. That's how they want it. We respect that. But in the parliament part, we meet. So I have had fair level of access to in the both sides. But the political appointees have a little bit of tricky meeting. Otherwise, yes, we will not complain, of course. But given a choice, yes, we also want to have, official meeting, because especially the fact that I got elected democratically should not make them shy away from Not just me as a person, but the office that I hold. And when you read the Syrian transition government or the transition administration, leaders are welcome in the State Department and things like that, but then it's all right, we don't complain. But we get access, and India also, yes, we get access to all the leaders.
Well, thank you. We're going to have a reception now, so
That's all right.
look,
We'll take, 2 questions quickly and then.
let's do 2 final quick questions. Please make them brief, because then we will have plenty of time to sit around and chat with you while Palki's walking over the microphone. I would say, even if you don't complain about getting access to the executive branch, there are plenty of Americans and others who regularly, and I think rightfully, raise their voice that we think, or lots of Americans think, that it's the right thing that 4 presidents of the United States have met with the Dalai Lama. So that's, even if you don't complain, it's okay for others too. All right, we have 2 questions here. Please keep them brief, and then we'll take 2 together.
Okay. I am Mary Wiley-Parampil from the Institute for Multi-Track Diplomacy, and I am wondering if there is any collaboration between the Tibetan people and the Uyghurs and maybe the Taiwanese in terms of addressing some of the common problems you have in terms of autonomy.
Okay.
Well, you're looking at the guy, Yang Chia. He organizes conferences every year, bringing all the Uyghurs and Chinese dissidents and Mongolians and Tibetans in one place. He has been organizing for many years. And I also want to acknowledge the ICD's president is here, Matthew Mukherjee is being appointed. He'll be taking over, and their ICD is also involved in reaching out to different groups as well.
Do you think that would be more successful as a strategy than working independently in terms of what has been done so far?
I think one should work independently, because you have to organize yourself. But then, and have coordination and, work together. Because I've attended some of the rallies and also some meetings. When you close your eyes and listen to Uyghurs and Mongols and Tibetans talking, it's almost like exactly the same story, the same history. So it's very, painful. But nonetheless, we do coordinate on certain events and certain projects, but then organize and function independent of each other. And then when you read about the violence in Kunming, it just kind of bothers you deeply because they are labeled terrorist. And then I was just reading an expert in China who said that few Han Chinese have killed more people, but they are labeled as murderers, but never terrorists. But here, because ethnic dimension, they are labeled terrorists. So we all experience very similar treatment or mistreatment. In that sense, we understand each other very well.
Okay, I am going to make this the last question. I know it's a democracy, but somebody has to lead. So I have the last question, and then we...
He believes in,
I believe that people should have a drink and
movement, yes.
move on.
Hello, my name is Mara Litchford. I'm a graduate student in Tibetan Studies at the University of Virginia. I was curious about the role that environmental conservation plays in your policymaking, particularly because the Tibetan diaspora is considered a model for other similar groups in the world, and also because Tibet proper is unique geographically in that the majority of Asian rivers, or major Asian rivers, find their source in Tibet, and since clean water is already becoming a problem, and access to clean water is already becoming a problem in Southern Asia, in what capacity does your policymaking address problems with pollution for the water supply in Tibet?
Yes, because today I was restricting my comment on democracy only. Environment is altogether different and major issue as far as Tibet is concerned. I was in Canada just a week ago, and I complained that some of the companies who invest in mining in Tibet, I think they have to be culturally sensitive, and their mining should be environmentally sustainable, and really socially they should be respectful of Tibetans. And economical also, local people should benefit. From what I learned was that any mining company who goes to Tibet and invest, they give a share of the profit to the Chinese company, or at most to the TAR, Tibet Autonomous Region government. Hardly anything goes at the prefecture or county or the village level. At the village where you actually extract the minerals. And after 10 or 50 years, when the minerals are exhausted, they're left with all the chemicals and the poisons, and their children are not benefiting from this extraction. So, and then there's pollution in the river. So it is our major concern. Now, broadly, Tibet is vital as far as environment is concerned. Because Tibet is also called, some even Chinese scientists call it third pole. After Antarctica and Arctic, Tibet has the third highest reserve of ice. And when they melt, the difference in Antarctica and Arctic, that when it melts, hardly melts, but when it does, it goes to the ocean. Tibet, it forms fresh water. For example, I think 40% of Indus River is a fresh water of the melting of Tibetan glaciers, which flow from Tibet to India, through India, from Jammu and Kashmir to Pakistan. Satluj River as well. Brahmaputra River from Tibet to India to Bangladesh. Mekong Delta, the famous Mekong Delta, yes, starts from Tibet and flows all the way to Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Thailand, and Salween River too. Yangtze River, Yellow River, all start from Tibet. And then now what you read in Indian news media is that there's some allegation that Chinese government is trying to divert some of the Tibetan rivers towards China. Now, whether it's true or not, it's empirically difficult to establish. It seems that there's a dispute. But nonetheless, there's some basis to it because China has 20% of the world population, but only 12% of fresh water. So that means 8%, which constitute about 400 million Chinese, are lagging in fresh water. So there are 400 million Chinese, right? So you have to supply them with water. Now, where do you get that? And Tibet is the source of all the rivers. So diverting Tibetan rivers seems to have that logical basis, at least, Now, some scientists say that before wars were fought over land, nowadays wars are fought over energy. Soon it will be over water. Now you can clearly see water sharing is a major issue between India and Pakistan, India and Bangladesh, between Indian states also, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, always disputing over sharing a river. And clearly, and some also environmentalists say that the delay or early monsoon in South Asia has direct relationship with Tibet. As the mists are formed over Indian Ocean, forms cloud, it hits the Tibetan plateau, and the rain comes. And then some say the jet stream over Tibet affects the climate all the way to South America. So in that sense, Tibet is vital as far as the environment of that area, of whole of South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Asia, to some extent Central Asia, and source of fresh water for more than 1.2 to 1.3 billion population. Now, when Tibetans were the steward or the guardian of the Tibetan plateau, we respected the natural flow of rivers. Now, damming of rivers. And just yesterday, I think a Chinese newspaper, it said that because so many dams are built over Tibetan rivers, anywhere from 2 to 20. Now, Tibet is becoming a major earthquake-prone zone, actually, because too many dams are being built. Now, when these dams are built, there are many of the companies seems to be building it for quick money. Build a dam, generate hydropower, sell it, make rich. But they're least concerned about environmental sustainability and whether it's engineerically sound or not. If there's a crack, if there's a flood, they'll be gone. So these are of major concern as far as Tibet is concerned. So that's why, Tibet issue is not just, it's a democracy setup which can be replicated to all the refugees or marginalized groups around the world so that they can be self-reliant, stand on their own feet. That's one. And environmentally is vital for the rest of the world. And then spiritually, also now there is a front page article in Time magazine about mindfulness nowadays. Millions of people following mindfulness, meditating. It has something to do with Tibetan Buddhism or the Nalanda tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. That also Tibet is vital. Now, as a civilization, also Tibet is one of the oldest civilizations. I mean, it ought to be preserved. It ought to be preserved, But that's why we make noises is we don't want to be a museum piece. We want to be as who we are. We are like any human being who deserve our rights, who deserve our dignity, who deserve our own identity. And that is the cause, And we're doing the best we can. And even though we are small in number, we try to be as loud as possible so that the Chinese leaders will get the better of this. And as His Holiness said, they need a bit of a common sense in their part of the brain, Once that common sense prevails, they see the hardline policy that they have. It's not working. If you look at the self-immolation, they're the second or third generation of Tibetans. They have many of them, or most of them have never met His Holiness Dalai Lama. They have not met exiled Tibetans. They're doing it because the repression is so severe. It's unbearable. So they are protesting. And in the harshest form, self-immolation. So on the one hand, it's a sad chapter of Tibet's history. On the other hand, it reflects the younger generation in exile have taken over the leadership, and the younger generation of Tibetans are taking over leadership in Tibet as well. So that reflects that we are here to stay. We will lead our cause till freedom is restored for Tibetans and our dignity and identity is respected. And that day, we do believe will come soon. And that's why we are in this together. So when that day comes, you all are welcome to come to Lhasa.
Good.
Till then, be with us. Thank you.
On that note, please join me in thanking Logpan Sangay, and I hope we're having a small reception afterward. We hope you all stay and follow up with any questions you have. Thank you. Good. How are you?
Good.